And Rick Rosso joins us from Washington. He's the chair of U.S.-India Policy Studies from the Center for Strategic and International Studies for further clarity. Thanks so much, Rick, for making time for us on NDTV. Ahead of the results in India, the market saw a huge sell-off. Where do you see the markets headed now? Can we expect more stability?
I think we're going to see a little more stability on policymaking than people kind of expected. The result was a surprise, certainly for a lot of people, most people, I dare to say. And so you had that initial reaction when you felt the government's hand was weakened, and those that believed that the Modi government was doing good things on business may have been spooked somewhat. But when you think about the makeup of the coalition, the Telugu Desam Party has been actually more supportive of modernizing the business environment and reforms. And the Janata Dal United overall, hasn't really been a break on that, unlike, some other regional parties, which may be less comfortable. So not surprised with a bit of wobbliness in markets because this rise was a bit of a result. But I suspect it'll stabilize. And once you begin to see government policy making, when the budget's announced, things like that, and you see that they still have aspirational plans for making the economy work better, I think the investment will come back, both in terms of portfolio as well as foreign direct investment.
In fact, Rick, some experts argue that the Indian economy is in a Goldilocks phase with strong growth and manageable macro stability risks. Where do you see India versus the world economy? Do you see real acceleration on the radar?
Well, the numbers, when you think kind of long term, are pretty incredible. By the end of the century now, estimates have India's population as being probably double of China's. India's will grow. China's will cut dramatically because of the long-term impact of the one-child policy. 6-7% growth in India certainly is the best among major economies. But still, in its heyday, China was growing at 10-12% a lot of years. So India doing well, but we know what even better kind of looks like based on recent examples of other large countries. To me, I think, India's real acceleration, certainly 6-7% growth is better than most, and it's going to help bring more people out of poverty and towards prosperity. But in about 15-20 years, when a majority of states are actually elected primarily by city voters rather than rural voters, I think that's when state-level elections start really focusing on modernization, because a lot of the same things that city dwellers want on reliable electric power and things are the same exact things that a lot of big investors, manufacturing in particular, need to happen. So I think the growth is great. The long-term numbers are incredible. I think the real acceleration on the economy for most states is still 15 or 20 years away, but some states will get there faster as they urbanize faster and you begin to see state-level voting patterns change.
Well, then, would you say that this is India's golden era? Are all the right boxes being checked? And is India on the takeoff stage?
Yeah, we can take a step in a different direction and talk about the defense partnership. That's where I think really the two sides, especially as it revolves around cooperation related to some of the more harmful elements of the rise of China. On defense and security cooperation, we've been able to do really some phenomenal things. And there, of course, the governments actually drive the agenda. When we talk about private sector cooperation, the government set the table, but ultimately the people that have to move are the private sector. And it's hard sometimes to understand what all their motives kind of look like. But if I'm thinking about how India can actually win a lot of that investment, some of it is driven by Delhi. India still has a relatively protectionist regime on trade. And when you think about the ability to bring in raw materials and input goods for manufacturing, hopefully the government will begin to ratchet down some of those high protections against the input goods, which would be a big impetus for domestic manufacturers. You still have about 40 sectors in India that have some type of foreign investment limitation, whether it's FDI caps or other regulations that impair foreign investors. Quick change in regulatory policy happens a lot in India, and companies would like a little more stability. But otherwise, most of the agenda for India to really capitalize on this economic and growth momentum and population growth momentum, again, really kind of lies with the states. So, it feels like India is on the cusp. It feels like it's been that for some time. I think we all very much know the steps, the additional steps that can be taken to really help India, I think, capture the prize, which is landing a much larger share of global manufacturing investment. So we'll see if it's possible to do that under coalition, which obviously things get a little bit more constrained that way.
Well, Rick, thanks so much, as always, for joining us with the latest update and insight.